This is our sellers panel we're going to be starting with. A little bit later on, we've got a buyers panel as well. I'm going to go ahead. By the way, I'm Dougan MILNE, as Nat mentioned. I'm vice president of our research division. Also, as he mentioned, I did spend several years overseas with our European deal teams over there. I've been back here in the U.S., based out of our Seattle office for a couple years now. I'm going to let our guests today give a brief introduction of themselves. Actually, Jim, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay. My name is Jim Perkins. I'm CEO of Radar Group, based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. The current company that we have is doing incubation of transmedia content, starting in the video game industry and moving into the film industry and television industry. Been in the game business for about 25 years. Had a company called FormGen, which I sold to GT Interactive in 1996. Also had a company called The Rush, which I sold to a distribution company in 2005. And have been involved in the sale of some other companies and the acquisition of other companies in the video game space.
Thanks, Jim. Trevor.
So I'm Trevor Fenkot. I'm the CEO of Bedlam Games, and now recently part of BitHeads. And I've been in the industry, from the game side, for about 12 or 13 years. I've built a boutique publisher in the early sort of 2000s, and then raised some money and spun out a development arm to do content creation across multiple platforms, social, digital, and traditional console. We recently sold to BitHeads, which is more of a pure technology company, and we're doing some exciting things in connected gaming and cloud-based stuff. So we're actually providing the gaming part to their technology.
I'm Emily Greer, and I'm the COO and co-founder of Congregate, which is a open platform for games, mostly on the web, now also on mobile. Anybody can upload. We add a lot of features, including community profiles, achievements, and a virtual goods platform for those games that have virtual goods to sell. We are mostly, we have about 45,000 games, about 1,300 new games uploaded every month, so a lot of content. We are monetized through advertising and virtual goods, with virtual goods now the majority of our revenue. And that's about it. The reason why I'm on the panel is we were acquired by GameStop in July of last year, so almost exactly year anniversary right now.
Almost a year anniversary.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Emily, actually, let's start some questions geared towards you.
Okay.
So very close to the 1 year anniversary, you've had some time to settle in under the GameStop umbrella. I know you guys are, for the most part, acting independently. Give us a little bit of an idea of what you've seen in terms of changes with your own company, though, with Congregate, since the acquisition.
Let's see. We were 20 people at the time of the acquisition. We're now 30 with 5 open positions. So just the sheer number of 50% growth, even though it's small relative to a lot of game companies, is of course always a major change. Most of the changes have to do with the resources and the sense of resources when we're considering what to do next. We don't have to think quite so much about is it going to pay back in 3 months? How does this affect our burn rate? Do we need to raise another round? We can just we can make a 6-month, 12-month, 18-month case, think about it, discuss it with our boss, and it's I think it's enabled us to be a little substantially more aggressive in what we're doing, which is a little bit funny for a startup to go. To become more aggressive after acquisition, but I think in our case it's actually true. I think in terms of that also reflects sort of the funding climate sort of immediately prior to our acquisition. There'd been 2 years where it was a little bit more closed down, so we'd been operating under that. I think the first 2 years it was a pretty wild and generous funding climate. So at that point, we were a little bit more aggressive too. So I think we've kind of gone through a roller coaster where it's a little bit more back like our early days. Otherwise, generally things are not so different there. GameStop is taking care of our HR and accounting, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how to leverage their existing traffic to help build Congregate.
Yeah.
But we're still a small startup operating in a Fortune 250 company.
Yeah. It's kind of nice to have the HR and accounting out of the way, though, huh?
Actually, not so much. They're all very nice, but it's a public company that's audited very heavily, that has a lot more requirements, and in particular, we have over 8,000 developers that we're paying, and it's a little tough for a company that's used to paying Nintendo, $500 million at a time to adjust to paying, a 17-year-old in Latvia $300 a month.
Yeah. Trevor, your story is interesting. Essentially, it's a technology company and a studio, or a technology company and a developer merging. I guess the simple question is why? Why? What was the insight there?
Well, I think certainly from our perspective, we'd come up from a more traditional game background. We'd done some transmedia work, and the things that we were seeing in the market was the shift from large-scale retail projects to digital. I think we're seeing the death throes of the kind of the $70 retail packaged good that's not done by a first party or publisher. So we started to see these kinds of things, and we'd done some work with BitHeads on the network side, because typically a developer or traditional game developer doesn't have a lot of networking bench strength unless they're doing sort of social games. And we'd work with them, and we sort of saw the writing on the wall, which is basically the evolution is happening to sort of smaller, lighter platforms, to social, to free-to-play. These are fundamental game changers in the game industry, and we wanted to be part of that. On the flip side, there was a need that we were very lucky to kind of address, and that as a technology company, I think what BitHeads was struggling a little bit with was the game part of it, the game design. You can develop technology, and they're very good at that, but maybe could use some bench strength in the actual game design part of it, and shepherding through the design process there. So for us, it was quite simple. It's a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. For us, it was selling to ultimately create more value. It wasn't. This was not a cash out for anyone at Bedlam. It was something designed to build greater value for shareholders.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And actually, in some ways, the stories are somewhat similar. A retail company buying a social gaming company.
Well, yeah, it's funny because
casual gaming company.
BitHeads has a very they're a top 100 employer. They have all kinds of processes and stuff that are very good at managing sort of larger teams. But we also struggle against some of those things as well, where it's a little institutionalized. We're used to be able to make decisions a little faster, maybe.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think it's entirely appropriate that they be very careful and heavily audited as a public company. It's nothing but goodwill towards the accounting department. It just is a little bit more tough.
By the way, her buyer is on the buyers panel. That's why she's saying things like that. Jim, so next question is going to go to you, but it's one that, again, anybody can answer. I'm going to throw a word up there, and it's something that Nat talked a little bit about, timing. Tell me a little bit about, you've been through a number of M&A events. What's the significance and the importance of timing the M&A event?
Timing's critical, and you have to really plan for it. When we were building FormGen and we were building a Rush, we were building it to sell it. We knew we had to do is build a lot of content, acquire a lot of content, acquire some franchises and intellectual property that would be of value to a much larger company. So we were thinking about that constantly. So we had the rights to Duke Nukem, had published a number of Duke Nukem products. We were on the verge of doing the Unreal deal with Epic to launch that franchise and that company in a big way. And we had a number of other products in the channel that were doing very well. So the timing was right. We had a multitude of bidders for the company, from IDOS to Activision to GT Interactive, and we really did time it to be around that time frame when these guys were looking for additional revenue every quarter as public companies. We really thought about it. The same goes for the next company that we did, and it's critical to do that. And as Nat said, you really have to get multiple bidders involved to increase the value. And so think about that ahead of time. Really think about who your customers or your buyers are going to be, and get to know them even before you want to sell the company.
Yeah, that's, I mean, in a miniature way, that's true for us as well. The reason that we sold when we did is because there's a clear opportunity in the space right now for connected gaming, which isn't just in verticals, but connecting the various platforms, having Facebook games talk to iOS games, and that kind of technical challenge can be done by BitHeads, the parent co, but in creating platform-appropriate experiences that you can connect to, that's the job of a game company. So really, there's a window for this, and the timing is everything. I suspect you'll see a lot more of these kinds of plays going on in the next 2 years.
And Trevor, when you and I talked, I remember you saying that it was sort of just at the time that you were talking about this partnership, this
Yeah.
M&A event, that you're also pitching ideas to other companies, and they're saying, well, how are you going to connect them?
That's right. It is
issue.
extremely clear that the established publishers, I mean, not mobile and social, but the established publishing community needs to figure out how to operate in this new space with nimbler and more connected players. And we were seeing that over and over again where, yeah, we love your game, that's a great game, but what does it talk to? Or how does it engage a consumer 24/7, which is a way that the traditional game industry hasn't really thought about it. They've thought about it in sort of 6-hour bursts of gameplay rather than being connected to your consumer 24/7.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something a little bit to what Jim was saying about bidders. I think bidders is very important for raising the value, but it's also about options. So, other bidders are an option, another round is an option, not to, continuing on your own and bootstrapping is an option, and all of those things help you raise value. At the time of our acquisition, we were break even. We wanted to invest more into going into mobile, so we were looking to raise a round. We got when we started receiving serious interest from GameStop. We mentioned various companies that had approached us in the past. We mentioned that we had a serious offer and started discussions with them, and at any point we were willing to walk away, which was very important to the process, and allowed us to consider each option in terms of both the value to the shareholders and the long-term growth and position of the company.
And you just reminded me of a question that I need to ask everybody, which is who here used advisors during your M&A process?
I used Quorum Group for the Forum 10 deal, and I've done deals on my own. I highly recommend using advisors. It just helps the process, and it's a third party that is not biased and can see things that you don't see. In the deals where we didn't use an advisor, one deal, we didn't get that competitive effect of having multiple bidders as much as we could have if we had an advisor to go out worldwide and look for buyers.
Yeah, I mean, my background before video games was actually corporate law, so I'm also a licensed lawyer. It would have been something that in our example, we didn't use an intermediary because we had a working relationship and there's a strategic synergy, but it is absolutely clear that even though we've identified sort of a primary group that our technology helps, it's absolutely clear that we need to have a global solution or global search involved for that reason.
We used an advisor, David Thacker with Allen & Co., though he has almost immediately after our deal closed left to become CFO of Zynga, so that was kind of a funny little thing. But even aside from our formal advisors, our board of investors were tremendously helpful through the process, both in selecting the advisors, lawyers, and just giving us advice on timing and how to structure things. And their interests were very much aligned with ours, and I think they were equally as helpful as the professionals.
One thing that I might chime in on that, I mean, in the Bedlam example, we actually had an institutional VC involved. So that was one kind of complexity to the transaction, because you're trying to explain the value. And in this case, Covington Capital was not conversant in the space. We were kind of a one-off investment for them. So it actually took a significant amount of time to get them comfortable with the ultimate value add to that. So we did not have the same help that you did.
Quick hand-raising game. How many Canadians do we have, or Canadian-based companies do we have in the audience? A handful. So Trevor, of course, this next one's going to be aimed at you. Talk to me a little bit about a Canadian company,
Yep.
acquired by a Canadian company. Talk to me a little bit about what some of the thinking process was behind that, and how and why you didn't choose to maybe go south of the border when looking for partners.
Yeah, I mean, it is significant. I think people have obviously heard about Canadian sort of incentive programs and stuff. In Ontario, where both Bitheads and Bedlam are, we have a 35% labor tax credit. So that would have been, it would be fine if we were acquired by a non-Ontario company, but for an Ontario company to acquire a non-Ontario company, it would have screwed up the tax, the very advantageous labor tax credit. So it was one of those things that it wasn't primary on our checklist. The most important thing, actually, not so strangely, was the cultural fit of the two the companies, but it certainly was the factor that allowed us to get past the institutional investor portion of it, which is, hey, actually, we had to actually ratchet up. There's a scientific research and development tax credit that Bitheads was better eligible for, and that Bedlam was better eligible for the 35% labor tax credit. So together, it was quite a powerful bottom line booster.
Yeah. Let's start with Jim on this next one. Tell me about surprises that occurred during the M&A event. I feel like most CEOs that we're working with, especially for their first time, there's always something that comes up. You know, it could be an issue with lawyers. It could be, oh my gosh, I didn't realize due diligence was that significant. What are some of the surprises you encountered the first time you went through an acquisition?
I think it's the surprises after you're acquired that are more significant. But some of the surprises during the process, trying to understand the motivation of the buyer is very, very important. What they're really going for. In our case, they were going for revenue, to bump the revenue up significantly, and they saw some opportunity to do that as a public company. But it's, when you look at it after the process, you realize they're either going to shut you down, or they're going to at least streamline and consolidate the people into the core company. Ultimately, the buyer does think that they're a lot smarter than you. So in a lot of cases, if it's not really a merger buyer, if it's in the same business. So it's a publisher buying a publisher, they really do think that they're going to be able to put this thing together better, and in many cases they do. But during the process, we didn't have too many bad surprises. There was a good amount of due diligence done and all of that. But getting motivation of the buyer is really critical.
And I'm okay with Bitheads are a lot smarter than we are in terms of networked and cloud-based technology. That's why we sold.
That's good. Emily?
Going through the process, I remember that there were several little mini crises where, especially right at the end, where there were, something was suddenly discovered, and then it'd take 3 hours or 4 hours to figure out that actually it really didn't matter. I don't even remember what they were anymore. I just remembered that there were these sudden oh no, and it was more about that they, it was something that had inadvertently not come out until the last few days or had been forgotten about. But I think being in sort of the Silicon Valley area, you hear a lot of stories about acquisitions and mergers and the process. And so, we had a lot of people who kind of advised us from the start how things would go, so it wasn't terribly surprising. And what I think on both sides, GameStop and our side, we've sort of told the truth through the process, and so there haven't been, not that other people lied, but there was no, we were both pretty upfront about what our interests and issues were, and there haven't been significant surprises since the acquisition.
Yeah, on our side, I mean, the only surprise we had nothing to do with the parties. I think that although our process was sort of an 8-month process, which is at the longer end of the spectrum, ours was actually the banking. One would assume just at a high level that, you know, if two people get married or, you know, whatever, that they can share a bank account. But apparently the banks at the last minute were like, no, you have to keep your banking separate, which is, I still struggle with this to that day, but.
Yeah. Emily, I do have a question for you, and this one goes down a little bit of a personal path, but and I feel like the only reason I can ask this is because I come from a family company, and in some ways I feel like I've been in the M&A business for 30 years when realistically it's about 6. You and your brother were essentially co-founders of the company.
Or
We were.
not essentially, we were.
Okay.
Yeah.
How has the relationship between you evolved over these years, and then how did the M&A event put any additional pressures on that relationship, or did you guys make it through pretty smoothly?
We made it through the M&A pretty smoothly. We were good friends before we started it. It's not something I'd recommend to the average family member. If you can't imagine doing it, then probably you shouldn't imagine doing it. We were good friends and knew we had complementary personalities and complementary business skills. So it seemed like a good idea, and it really has turned out to be. I think when you're working with a partner, the level of trust that you have in that person and the level of communication you have with that person are totally key to the success. Yeah. And with a family member or sibling, you automatically have that trust. And I like to say that we had, before we started it, we had 30 years of practice in fighting and then resolving the fight. One of the things that was really surprising to me in the first year was just how quickly we would fight about things. And in previous business jobs, I'd always been polite and diplomatic, and then what we found is with each other, we just told it like it was immediately, and it actually was in a time pressured situation. That's really valuable because you just get it out, clear it out, resolve it, deal with it. So that's been really great. I do think that we in the period, like the first year or so when we were when servers were crashing and we were working 80 hours a week, there were definitely times when I was really glad that I was not going to see him for another 24 hours, and our parents would come to visit, and I was like, really? I need a break. Overall, our relationship has grown stronger, and through the M&A process, I think actually one thing in particular is when we were looking at the revenue, we talked about it as this is the amount coming to the Greer family, including myself, my brother, and some relatives who were investors, and that's how we thought about it. When we started it, it was Jim's idea. He came from the game industry. I sort of jumped in and said I want to help. So we started off as unequal founders, and then as the years have progressed, are now really sort of fully 50-50. We had set the shares between us in the early days, readjusted it after a little bit, but when we came to see the final numbers, both of us looked at it and said, this isn't really fair relative between us, and we tried to find out actually what we could do about it at the time of acquisition, but there wasn't really, without paying double taxes, there wasn't really anything we could do, and it would slow down the acquisition. And because we were siblings and had trust, we were like, okay, we both agree this isn't quite right, and we'll deal with it later, and we can have that trust.
That's wonderful. It's a unique situation. The brother-sister founder duo is pretty neat.
Yeah, the extra unique situation is that my brother's second child was born 2 weeks before we closed. So that was also a little bit of a wrench in the closing process.
Was there not, if I don't remember correctly, wasn't there another medical issue right at the closing process?
I got a concussion on the day we signed the papers.
Perfect.
Just
from the buyer?
so you know, after I
big
signed,
check?
I signed the papers. No, I had, we had a lot of angels in our angel round, and we had a lot of signatures to get, and there was, very time pressured situation in terms of getting them. So I had been up all night, among other things, teaching my father how to use a scanner to send his thing. And this fell on me because my brother was up all night with his 2-week-old, and I had no sleep for a couple of days, and then stupidly went out to play softball with my softball team, and a ball came up, and I just kind of watched it fall in my face.
Perfect.
So one of my sort of warnings is don't go out and play sports immediately after selling your company.
Thank you. Jim, you had touched a little bit on something earlier, which was the what happens post-acquisition. And you said there were some surprises there. But tell me a little bit more about some of your experiences, and we can move down the line from there.
I think post-acquisition, the critical part is obviously to get all of the critical people to your company and the success of your company on employment agreements with these companies, and set up that arrangement beforehand. Don't leave it till after, because it's not going to happen. Couple of things is integration into the company and the bureaucracy. If it's a large company, you have to get used to the bureaucracy that goes on. Things slow down quite a bit. Decisions don't get made as quickly as possible. So, you just got to be patient with that. There's definitely benefits. There's a lot of meetings, more meetings than you would ever imagine, in terms of making decisions on that, and you're seeing people in those meetings that may not be relevant to the meetings, but you have to be patient with that as well. But overall, it was a fun process. It was a very fun process in seeing the whole company grow, the success of the products, and you having a direct effect on the success of that company.
Yeah. Trevor, it hasn't been a long time for you, but what are some of the things you have seen?
Yeah, no, it's only been sort of 7 months for us. We closed in the very time-pressured way on the stroke of 11:59 and December 31. And so for us, it's not been a long time, but it's been extremely active. The acquisition or our selling was very directed towards creation of a particular productized cloud-based solution. So there was an idea in mind of what we have to build. So we didn't have any time to go through the normal formalities of how we're going to communicate. So that's kind of tripped us up a bit, but it's just been nose to the grindstone for the last 7 months. So I'm sure there are things there that that we just can't see yet that'll come up, but so far it's just been very, very busy.
Yeah.
So one thing that's been is still a learning process and a challenge for us is that we're working with a company that's in another state and that is
Right.
very substantially sized, and just figuring out who to talk to about what issues is a challenge. I've been sort of kind of going from department to department begging for org charts just so that I know the names of people, especially with such a large company. There's so many mics, there's so many gyms, and just trying to figure out who exactly is the right person to talk to is a little bit of a challenge. And I think one thing we didn't do enough early is go out and visit that office and meet people for person to person and start building relationships, because I think in a long-term marriage like that, that's really important, and something we didn't do enough of early on because we were just trying to sort of keep up.
Right. Yeah, the relationship building process. And Jim, I'm going to start again with you. Nat had talked a little bit earlier about EMC being sort of, in some ways, the king of acquisitions, because they've done such an amazing job with their returns on the money they've spent. One of the things they're famous for, and one of the things that has brought them so much success, is that they have specific internal mandates that say if we're going to spend X amount on the acquisition, we have to spend half again that amount on really building that business as a standalone business line. And we saw that happen with VMware. They did an incredible job with that. We saw that happen with, I know we're getting outside the realm of the gaming industry, but how did you feel in terms of going back to the post-acquisition? What were some of your experiences in the help you received, both financially and otherwise, from your new parent company in terms of building your business line within the company?
I think it started out slow and the communication was slow, and like Emily says, that finding out who decides what and where get decisions made was slow at the beginning, but it really sped up. And the interesting part is if you're part of a growing company, things then really do speed up, and you're tied into every decision, hopefully, that affects your business and where they're looking for growth. So be prepared to get tied into that total process, which is a lot of fun and very educational as well. But yeah, I'd say that expect to be in a lot of meetings. I mean, you're part of a larger company, and expect to be part of that larger company, and stay in touch with the CEO and stay in touch with the decision makers that made that decision to buy you. I think that's very, very important. You don't want to be left behind. You want to be involved in a lot of those decisions and make sure that your company, your developers, your employees and others, partners, are all represented in that larger company as much as possible. Otherwise, they may lose focus on you.
Yeah. And Trevor, I know you already talked a little bit about, I mean, part of, one of the sweet byproducts of your guys' M&A event was that you have better access to some of those Canadian incentives. So perhaps that aside, what have you noticed as some of the other benefits of the partnership?
I think that for us, there really was a lot of synergies between the two types of industries. For example, BitHeads was extremely good at creating like these, rock solid, scalable, well-architected, software solutions, cloud-based software solutions, whereas game development in general could use maybe more rigor. Like there's a debate between agile versus waterfall. There's all kinds of debates on how to make games and code for games and make it extensible. But we've really learned a lot in terms of perhaps more formalized production process. And I say that having come from a publishing background where we thought we had that figured out as well. So that's been really, really good. And I think that having access to a body of, I'm going to call them like pure technologists who don't necessarily have a whole table full of Star Wars action figures on their desk. I call it the technological sort of like adult supervision has been really, really helpful. I still have them, but I mean, they don't have them.
I know a lot of technologists who have Star Wars figures on their desks.
Yeah. But yeah, that's been very helpful for us.
Yeah. And Emily, I don't know, maybe we should be careful, but...
No, I think there's several things that I can point to. One thing is that GameStop has is tremendous relationships and connections with all the major console publishers, and that's been particularly helpful for our advertising business in that console advertisers were our main main source of direct advertising, and being part of GameStop has definitely added to that legitimacy, and we get included in discussions for larger GameStop promotions. That's been very helpful, and we've certainly seen the return on our in our ad business in the last few months. Also, they've got millions of hardcore game customers, and particularly through sort of digital promotions, emails, things like that. They're introducing them to Congregate, which has been very helpful. So
it's a fantastic channel to be a part of. Yeah. Are they sending over barrels full of money to help you guys do more acquisitions?
And I think that's a question for Chris on the buyers panel. GameStop is very, the retail business is very competitive and margin focused, and GameStop is very disciplined on that. So they certainly have announced that they've set a substantial amount aside for acquisitions, but they're pretty hard-nosed about what kind of return and what kind of fit it is. So
Yeah.
You make a good point, Dougan. Find out how much cash they have to do what you want to do beforehand. I mean, in the case of GT, they had cash. We were able to go out and do the Epic Unreal deal. We were able to do a driver deal, many other deals that we were able to do. I've been involved in other acquisitions where they didn't have the cash to do the deal. So they didn't really have an expansion plan that fit the model that they were buying. And so it's kind of like putting two companies together that didn't have all the cash they wanted to grow the company. So, and I've seen it in the middle. So really find out ahead of time, do they have the cash to do what you want to do? Are they going to spend it on what you want to do if that's their growth plan? Even if they tell you it's their growth plan, find out where that cash is coming from before you sign.
Well, the one caveat I would add to that is because obviously we sold to a company that isn't publicly traded, but we did it for strategic advantage, and it's not like BitHeads has like a wheelbarrow full of money to fund these plans, but we just recognize it clearly. Together, when you have a scalable business opportunity, when you have something that is scalable by VC metrics, together you have a better chance of getting funding than you do as either just a pure content play or a pure technology play. Playing in the intersection of cloud-based gaming, and mobile and social, that's the magic sort of triangle that allows. We did the math on it. Like basically, our combined valuation is much better than the individual one. So our access to capital has bloomed, and we're currently going through a round to accelerate the development. So it's just
great.
one possible different story, which is that we didn't sell to the eventual purchaser. We sold to get access to better capital.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If you're selling your company or thinking about selling your company, and there's other companies that company is buying, let's say there's a bigger company that's buying you, but they're probably thinking about buying other companies that look like you. Find out who they are, because there is a possibility of putting your companies together before they acquire you and get 4 or 5 times the value. And I think what Trevor's doing is very, very smart. He's positioning himself to be a much greater value, and think about who else these guys are going to buy before you buy you.
That's great advice. That's great advice. I think we're at a good time here to maybe open it up to the floor and see if you guys have any questions for our panelists here, please.
Tim Merrill, DigiCapital, we're a games investment bank. 3-part question, which is the worst type. Why did you sell? Why did you sell when you sold? And why did you sell to who you sold to over everybody else?
Great questions.
So I can start. We sold because we'd taken venture capital, and we knew we were going to need an exit eventually. And being realistic, it's either selling or IPO, and we were not an IPO track company. Once then you're optimizing for the situation, the outcome for everybody involved, financial outcome for everybody, the future situation of the company, and the future situation of ourselves and the employees. In terms of timing, when we had an offer that we were happy with financially and we thought was going to be a situation in which our employees and ourselves would be happy and would continue to grow Congregate, then we took it. We had just spent 4 years of our lives and a lot of our souls building Congregate, and it was very, very important to us that we feel that the Congregate was going into a situation in which it could grow and blossom long term. I know not everybody. There were a lot of situations into which we could have gone, which would have been more of a rolling reorg, an acqui-hire, and we never considered those.
With us, we decided to sell because we saw strategic advantage to it. Like we basically saw the Reese's peanut butter cup that basically alone as a content play or alone as a technology play. There was some value there, but there's a force multiplier together. And in fact, since we sold, in the 7 months we've been together, we've seen the direct result of this as we are working in market with publishers and developers solving these problems of like connecting, iPad games to Facebook games, connecting Facebook games to MMO. Like that's the kind of stuff that takes game knowledge and technical bench strength, and so the reason was the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup there. And when we sold, like why we chose to do it then was, I think that there's opportunities over the next sort of, let's say 2 to 3 years in this space, and we wanted to get in early and get ahead. So.
To get back to, I'd also say we were on a sort of decision tree of round versus acquisition, and it's, what were the odds that we would be enough more valuable after, 2 years down the road after the round, and we decided to take the slightly sure thing.
Yeah, and the one thing that was mentioned at the previous thing, people weren't here for that, was there's that buy versus build decision, and for us, we were at a decision tree where we had existing investors. We could have done another round and tried to build a team that could do this, crazy technical stuff, but it would have taken us 2 years to do, and it'd be far too expensive, so the immediate value was much more important to us.
Why did we sell? We saw definitely a consolidation in the industry, and we thought there was a time frame to move now before it consolidated and left us behind. We thought it was the end of retail in 1996, which we were a little off on that. When we were off in 2005 when we saw the end of retail. So, anyway, we were thinking forward on that. So we thought it was the right time based on that, the consolidation of the industry. We also saw a competition between publishers to buy up companies and revenue for their quarterly reports. And we picked the company that we thought would grow the fastest and had the most cash to do that. We got offered cash deals. They were half of what the stock deals were, and we saw potential for growth to see that stock deal growing in, 3 or 4 times after the acquisition.
Okay. Great. I think we've got another one here as well.
Hi. I'm an independent game developer from Korea. We have been approached by a US company who has interest in acquiring us. I was wondering about the additional overheads or costs that were involved during the acquisition process, because I'm hearing things about the crazy lawyer fee that we have to take on and stuff like that. I was wondering, from your personal experiences, what were the, other than the stress that you had from the deals, but costs and overheads.
The lawyers weren't cheap. The advisors weren't cheap either. But those were significant. In the overall size of the deal, they absolutely made sense. I'd say just as important was that in a 20-person company, it took up most of the attention of the 2 founders for 3 months prior to the acquisition, and then to a lesser degree through the transition for 6 to 9 months after that. And that's a pretty substantial cost in terms of what you can get done and what in that time period. I think it's only in the last 3 or 4 months that I feel like we're truly operating efficiently and concentratedly again. I certainly don't regret it, but it was a very real cost.
Yeah, for us it was a very significant cost. Based, again, this was not an end transaction, so we wanted to conserve as much cash to move the company forward as possible. So it was kind of all, borne by the 2 companies, and but I wouldn't have it any other way. We had superb advisors, and again, even relative to the size of the transaction, we had KPMG. We knew we had to be as buttoned down as possible, which may be different in your situation. It may be a larger company acquiring you, but in our situation, we wanted to make sure everything was absolutely done properly, which takes money to invest in the ultimate result. So.
Ultimately, the costs are necessary, but the costs can triple or quadruple if you're dealing with people who do not understand your industry. So get advisors that understand your industry, lawyers that understand your industry, accountants that understand your industry. There's just no use in teaching these guys while they're getting paid. And that's a really critical part. That's that you're going to pay the price, but find the guys that know the business, and you'll save a huge amount of money.
And I would imagine that an international deal is going to have more overhead just because of cultural differences and paperwork
Thank you,
differences.
yeah.
So, good luck.
Yeah. Please.
I wondered, like, you're all like sort of married off now, as it were. What your observations are of the current environment where the polite term is frothy. We're in a bubble, right? It's going to pop 6 to 12 months or whatever. What would you do, or what's your general advice, or any looking back, I wish I had been at this point in the froth, or I just wonder any kind of general observations you might have for us.
Well, I'll bow out first because we're swinging. So we're married, but we're out there. Just saying.
Can't beat that. I mean, we're back into it in a big way. I think this environment is the most exciting environment I've ever seen, period, over the last 3 decades. And the amount of innovation, the valuations are high, getting higher. All of you guys are ripe for huge amount of growth, acquisition if you want it, or raising money. And this is just a perfect time because 4 years ago, it was pretty stagnant, I think. People were just doing the same thing over and over again. Now it's just like it's the Wild West. Go and do it. So it's fantastic right now for that, and I think that's going to last for 2 or 3 years because technology is advancing so fast, and our customers are getting so smart at what they want to do, and they know what they like now. There's no fooling them. You've got to have the right product, but it's a great time.
One thing is, I think when it changes, it's going to change very rapidly, and you'll have 1 month of froth and then 1 month of no answered phone calls. So if something comes to you that's great, I would take it and not hold out for something later because you don't know when the cocktail party is going to end.
Yeah, that's very
And you
true.
bring up a good point, which is, you said if somebody approaches you, but alternatively to that, we're in a situation where even if you're not a perfectly baked company yet, it's if done properly, it's not to your harm to be out in the market and looking at some of your options.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, our agenda is fairly, transparent. We know we have to do this, and we know we have to be out there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We're passionate about what we're doing, so we're not doing it for, a cash out. We're doing it because we think we can build value to an ultimate partner as well. So,
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm the CEO of a 60-person profitable strategy game company. I've been around for about 3 years. And when you're being evaluated for like an acquisition, what do they look at in terms of, do they look at your top line revenue in terms of your run rate as multiple, your employee count? I know it's pretty complicated, but can you talk about that a little bit?
The answer on that is yes, yes, yes. If they're doing a good job, they're looking at everything. They're also looking, at least in the case of GameStop, who is, as the end pinnacle of the merger and acquisition of most of the game retailers has done a lot. They were looking a lot at cultural fit and employee, sort of executive personality, and that's really important, and I think a great thing for both sides to be looking at. If you're getting married, you want for it to work as well as possible, you need to get along and think about things in approximately the same way. And that was actually probably a surprise to me, was how much they were looking at that. But I think it was a good thing to be looking at.
yeah, in our case, it was sort of we agreed that KPMG would be the arbiter of these things, and we had much more traditional metrics that were not sort of pie in the sky future looking things, but we wanted it that way because again, this is about this is not about us selling to bit heads to drive away in a Lamborghini. This is about building something that will ultimately keep building. So.
Yeah, be prepared to be grilled for 8 hours straight on every metric of your business, and if they're doing the right thing.
And put that future in front of them, put that dream of huge success in front of them. Tell them what you're going to do for them, because the day after you get acquired, they're going to ask you, what are you going to do for me now? You know, what great product or technology do you have that is going to blow everybody away? That's really important, and that'll increase your value pretty significantly if you can get that point across early.
I think there was a slide that was out in the last presentation that was extremely good, which had a number of different metrics. Some of them are headcount. It's rarer in the more traditional games industry to be measured by headcount. That tends to be sort of an engineering metric, but things like, forward-looking cash, all the normal accounting metrics.
If you're a significant engineering company, they're going to really want to dig into your code and talk to all of your engineers and know everything about your servers.
Yeah, if you're selling your company now, if you're thinking about selling your company now, there is a big shortage of talent out there. People are buying for talent pools, and this is a good time to sell if that's what you want to do. So if you've got a great group of talented people, then sell that if that's what you want to sell now. But think about the future and what you could build for them in the future. So,
great answers. Do we have any more questions from the audience? I think we're on a very close to ending note here, but I know you guys have actually given tons of advice throughout this. You've been incredible panelists. If we could just run down the line and your 2 minutes of what are the most important things to be thinking about or looking out for or prepared for as a CEO or a founder of a small studio or a publisher?
I think it's just network in conferences like this. This is probably one of the best conferences to network in, to get to know other people, get to know potential buyers, start identifying them early, partners, buyers, and all that, and think about what, in a year, that guy would be probably a really good partner. And ask people's advice. One of the things that's great about this industry that very few other industries don't do is share information. If you're in the paper industry or you're in the oil, consumer goods business, for soda or whatever the case may be, they don't share any information. This is an amazing industry, so use that information to network. Ask people, anybody you meet, their advice on what you should do. And you're going to find guys that will potentially be your buyers in the future.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very long game, and to the marriage point, it is really, really important because for most of you out there, you've built this company, you've done all this sort of 80-hour weeks and whatever, and when you're selling, one thing that was important to us was the cultural fit, because we had to be, although we were selling, we needed to understand that we were being welcomed as partners rather than kind of part of the alien Borg, and that's really, really important, because otherwise there's going to be hard times, and if you're starting off on the wrong foot, it's going to just be terrible.
I'd say I absolutely agree with everything they've said. The thing that I would add is that at a certain point, it's easy to start thinking that when you sold your company, you're finished, you won. But that's not what it's like at all. If they're acquiring you, they're acquiring your company and you and your expertise and passion, and you should expect it. It's a marker in the road, and expect to continue to be working just as hard and focusing just as closely on your business for years to come.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Any other questions before we start clapping?
Just have one quick one.
Yeah, please.
What's the expected time frame in terms of something like this? I'm not saying that I'm selling the company, but I'm just curious. What's the expected time frame for you to close like a deal? I've heard all kind of ranges, like 3 to 6 months. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, but it's getting shorter and shorter. It seems to be getting shorter and shorter, in my opinion. In some cases, I've seen Zynga deals getting done pretty quickly, and other companies, private companies doing deals pretty quickly because they're desperate to build their competitive edge as quickly as possible. But 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on your geography as well. Like, for example, I think Zynga just acquired a shop in Toronto, probably for this, like, there's a good tax incentive there, so that's a bit of a hotbed. Whereas some other things are oversaturated, like Montreal, which is also in Canada, is just it's done. So the deal cycle will depend also on your geography as well as just what the industry is doing.
It took us about 5 months, and it started off very fast. The dating period went very fast. The negotiation period went very slow, and then the closing went very fast again. So it was, I think, depending on the timing of the buyer and the seller and how close they start out, it could easily, compress substantially.
So I have a quick another answer to that, and then I do actually have one more question here. If you are actively taking yourself to market, in other words, you believe your company would be very attractive out on the market, we tell our clients it's roughly 6 to 9 months. Plan on 6 to 12 months as the outside of the range. If you are being approached, especially in the gaming industry because it is moving quite fast, anything around social, etc. If you're being approached, you've been approached, you say, yeah, that's the company. That's my partner right there. It can be anywhere from about 3 to 6 months. It'll be a shorter timeline. But if you're actively trying to bring other bidders into the process, actively going out and trying to find those bidders, it's quite a bit longer. Yeah. What was my question going to be? Yeah. Did you guys run a proactive process or more of a reactive process during your M&A events?
Proactive in every case.
Proactive in every case.
Yeah.
You said, we're ready to go out to market and look for a buyer.
Yep.
Perfect.
And we had to have multiple bidders. I mean, otherwise they'll just take their time forever. You have to have multiple bidders. So just make sure you have them, even if you have to make them up. That's semi-funny.
And I'm wondering if Bid
True.
has made those bidders up. Anyway, ours was very reactive because, again, it was strategic, so
Right.
there was no point in the other kind of piece of it.
Yeah. Ours is a little bit of a hybrid. We've been talking to people occasionally for a long time. Then we reacted to GameStop and activated a lot of discussions that had happened before and brought in a couple new ones, and then ran with a specific time pressure, are you in, are you out kind of thing. And so it was a little bit of both.
Wonderful. My watch says we're at time, but this thing has been wrong for like 3 weeks now every time I try and reset it. Are we at about time? Is that right? Half after the hour? Okay. Thank you very much. You guys have been excellent panelists. Thank you very much.